Good afternoon and welcome into introduction to prompt engineering, okay? So before we get started, feel free to raise your hand if you ever heard about generative AI. Okay, that's good, okay? And I have another one question for you. So feel free to raise your hand if you ever heard about prompt engineering, okay? Thank you. So that means you come into the right place, all right? So for today's agenda, we will cover about the concept, generative AI, so what are foundational model, and then the subset of foundational model called a large language model. And for this agenda, we will also cover about some of the key concepts of prompt engineering. That would be the best practices and some of the key components inside of your prompt engineering. And the last agenda of the day, we will cover some of the basic prompt technique to optimize the prompt when you're trying to ask some of the question inside foundational models or large language model. So in here, there are 3 different techniques that we are going to cover for today's agenda. So for foundational model, in here, generative AI, you can use generative AI technology to create a new content. So with the new content, maybe you can generate some image, or maybe generate some story, or maybe summarize content, maybe coming from a news paper. So you can summarize those news report, and then you can summarize it and create some email summary using the generative AI. So before we cover about prompt engineering, let's take a look at foundational model and large language model. So how does foundational model work? So before foundational model, we have machine learning. So with machine learning, you have a model, and then you need to specify the use case for your model. So you either choose supervised, semi-supervised, or unsupervised learning for your machine learning models. Whereas with the foundational model, you use a deep neural network to emulate a human brain functionality to handle a complex task. So for example, in here, you can generate a text, or maybe generate an image, or create a chatbot application using a foundational model. And with the foundational model, you have your pre-trained unlabeled data set, and then you can use the foundational model for a general task. So for example, for text summarization, or maybe you create some image, or you can also ask some of the question using foundational model. And if we take a look together with the foundational model, you can have a different stage to achieve the best result for your foundational model. So the first step would be the pre-train. So during the pre-train stage, the foundational model used the self-supervised learning to capture the data from vast data set that consists of trillions of words, okay? And you use the foundational model algorithm, which is the deep neural network, to get the context of the text. So that means when you're trying to ask some of the question using the foundational model, or maybe you're trying to generate some summary from email or a text, you use those data set in the form of trillions of words, and in here with the foundational model, you use this model in the training stage. So if you have one specific word called drink, for example, the foundational model will take a look whether or not drink is a noun or a verb in the pre-training process. And the second one would be fine-tuning. So you take the existing pre-trained foundational model and you use your own data set to train the model. So if you need to implement a specific for your use case, maybe you need to have pre-trained model for a specific smaller data set. Maybe you need to generate some report for medical research. So you use the journal from the medical research as a data set to fine-tune your foundational model. And the last one would be prompt engineering. So you optimize the prompt when you're asking or maybe generating some image through your foundational model. So with the prompt engineering, you don't need to retrain the model, so you only optimize the input that you want to foundational model generate the output. And in here we have two different types of foundational model. So the first one would be the text-to-text. So we call it the large language model, which is the subset of your foundational model. So if you're trying to create your chatbot application or maybe summarize some text, you can use the text-to-text foundational model with the large language model. And the second one would be the text-to-image model. So you take the neural language input, that would be the input text that you want to ask inside of your foundational model. And in here, you can generate some image using the text-to-image foundational model with text to image. So you can use, for example, stable diffusion to generate the image for your text to image foundational model. So if we take a look, the first one would be your large language model. So with the large language model, it's a subset of text-to-text foundational model. And in here, with the large language model, you take the input in the form of text. And in here, the large language model will provide the output in the form of text when you use the large language model. So let's say if you need to summarize some content, maybe an email or maybe a news, so you can use the large language model. And with the large language model, you use what is called the transformer architecture. So in here, every time you input something into your large language model, your texts are going to be converted into a number because the computer sometimes understands a number rather than a text. So in the transformer architecture, your text is going to be converted into a number. And once it's already converted into a number, then inside of your transformer architecture, it will take a look inside of your data set which text or word is similar to one another. So let's say you input a text cat. So inside of your transformer architecture, it will convert cat as a number, and it will find the closest number that have the similar meaning. So that means if it's a cat, the similar word would be feline. And then after, inside of your transformer architecture, when the architecture already find the similar words, then to output the value, it will transform the number into text again. So the decoder will convert the number into a text using the transformer architecture. And if we take a look together, so with the foundational model, you use a neural network to identify the word or the content. So inside of your neural network, the first one, we have an embedding layer. So the embedding layer would be the first layer that convert your text into a number. So inside of your neural network, that would be the input layer. That would be the embedding neural network. And the second one would be the feed forward. So because inside of your transformer architecture, you need to find the similar word and the similar number. So inside of the feed forward, you would assign each word with the weight to find those similar words. Okay? And the last one would be the attention mechanism. So with the attention mechanism would be the part of your text that you're trying to ask inside of your foundational model. So inside of your attention mechanism, it will take a look at the context of the text that you're trying to ask using the attention mechanism. And if we take a look together, so what are some of the use cases for your large language model? So in here, the first one, you can have your chatbot. So let's say if you have a customer wants to ask some of the question regarding a specific product, so you can use the large language model where the customer asks some of the question, and then it will generate some output or some answer. And in here, you can also boost your employee productivity. So in here, I have a question. Does anyone works as a developer? So if you are a developer, feel free to raise your hand. Okay? So if you are a developer, the large language model also generates some code for you. So previously, sometime if the developer stuck to generate the code, maybe they go through the documentation. But with the large language model, you can have the model generate a code for you to boost the productivity of your employee or your developer. And the next one would be you can also enhance the creativity. So maybe if you need to generate some image for your product campaign, so you can use the foundational model, or maybe if you need to generate some product description for your product, you can also use the large language model to enhance some creativity. And the last one would be to accelerate the process optimization. So maybe every time you already finish with the meeting, you need to generate some meeting text or maybe report. So you can use the large language model to generate those meeting report or document to speed up the process for your optimization for document processing. And we already see some of the prompt engineering would be the fastest way to harness power of your large language model. And we already see the difference between your foundational model and then your large language model. And the next topic, we will discuss how to improve your prompt when you're trying to ask some question or generate some content using your large language model. So in this part, we will talk about the key concept of your prompt engineering. So in the beginning, we already see some of the difference between fine-tuning and from tuning. So fine-tuning, you take the existing foundational model or large language model and you use your own data set to retrain the existing foundational model or large language model. So maybe if you want to generate some report regarding medical health report, so you take some of the journal report from the healthcare journal, and then you fine-tune the existing model. So because you are fine-tuning the model, you need to have additional compute resource and compute time to fine-tune the existing large language model or foundational model. Whereas with prompt tuning, you don't need to optimize the existing large language model or the foundational model. So you can give a set of instruction through your large language model or foundational model when you're asking the question. So you can influence the output that you're trying to ask when you are asking through the large language model or foundational model. Okay? And if we take a look, there are some elements inside of your prompt. So the first one would be you need to have a set of instruction that you want to ask or maybe generate a content or maybe generate an image. So you need to provide a set of instruction. And in here, the second one, you can also provide a context. So for example, I want to generate some email or maybe generate a report. So you provide the context for the report inside of your prompt. And the next one, you can also add some input data. So maybe if you need to influence the output, you can also add additional information for your input data inside of your prompt. And last one would be the output. So let's say if you want to generate a summary email or maybe generate an image and you need to choose a specific format for your image. Maybe you want to use a PNG or maybe a JPEG. So you set the output indicator inside of your prompt. So I will give you around 10 seconds to read through the prompt. So in here, we have some example for your prompt. So in here, we want to create a summary for Amazon Prime student. And if we take a look inside of your prompt, there will be a couple of elements inside of your prompt. So the first one, you provide a list of instruction and the output of the prompt. So in here, the instruction would be write a summary. And the output indicator would be just use 2 sentences. So you can also control the output when you're generating or asking a question inside of your prompt. And in here, you can also provide a context. So what summary that I want to have inside of my prompt. So it's summary for online and then the service is shipping. And in here, you can also provide the input data. So what type of sentences or paragraph that you want to summarize. So you put it inside of your input data. All right? And what are some of the best practices, right, when you're designing an effective prompt? So the first one, you need to be clear and concise. So sometimes the best way to ask a question would be a straightforward question. So in here, you need to be clear and concise that what you are trying to do inside of your prompt. And the next one would be you can also include the context. So maybe if you need to summarize or maybe you need to create 500 words of essay, make sure you provide the context inside of the prompt. So that way you can generate a better output for your prompt. And the next one would be use direct effectiveness. So in here, for example, if I want to summarize my text into 2 sentences or 500 word, you put it inside of your prompt. So you can use directness to have an effective prompt. And in here, you can also set up the output. So let's say I want the output to be, let's say, a poem or maybe a text summary. So you define it inside of your prompt. Okay? And the next one, you can always start with the question. So what, who, how, when. So you can also start with the question every time you are trying to write any prompt. And in here, the best way would be you set up the example and the output. So let's say I want to check whether or not this specific text has a positive sentiment or negative or neutral sentiment. So you provide an example and provide the output whether or not this specific text is a negative or positive or neutral sentiment. So you can also provide a response inside of your prompt. And in here, if you're asking question, make sure rather than having a long prompt, asking a lot of question, you can always break down the question one by one when you are trying to build an effective prompt. And the last one, you can also experiment. So inside a foundational model, you can use a multiple foundational model and compare one model to a different model. So you can also experiment and choose which model provide a better output. So we already discussed some of the best practices of effective prompt. So after this, we will have a sequence of questions. So I will read out the question, and if you prefer to answer prompt 1, then raise your hand. And then if you prefer to answer prompt 2, feel free to raise your hand. All right? Are you ready? Okay? So the first one, so which prompt followed the best practice to be clear and concise? So raise your hand if you choose prompt 1. So take your time. Remember, you need to be clear and concise. Raise your hand if you think 1 is the correct answer. Okay? Thank you. So raise your hand if you think the prompt 2 was the correct answer. All right, that's good. So I see most of you answer prompt 2. So let's see what is the correct answer. Okay, so for those of you who answer prompt 2, that is correct. So you need to be clear and concise. So if we take a look, the difference between the prompt 1 and the prompt 2 is much more clear. So you calculate the sum of 4, 8, 12, and then 16 compared to the prompt 1. All right, are you ready for the next one? We still have a couple of questions. Okay. So the second one would be best practices for include context if needed. Okay, so I will give you around 10 seconds to read through the prompt. Right? So raise your hand if you think prompt 1 is the correct answer. Okay, no one? No one? Okay. Prompt 2. So if you think prompt 2 was the correct answer, feel free to raise your hand. Okay, I see most of you answer prompt 2. So let's take a look which one is the correct answer. So that is correct. So prompt 2 was the correct answer. Okay? So can I get everyone hand clap? Because I think most of you answer the question correctly. Okay? So we have a couple of more questions. Okay? So stay tuned. So the next one. So which prompt follows the best practice for use directiveness for desired response type. Remember, directiveness. All right, so I hope you already read the prompt 1 and 2. So raise your hand if you think prompt 1 was the correct answer, okay? All right, I see prompt 1. And then for prompt 2, so if you think prompt 2 was the correct answer, no one? No one? Okay, so that means you answered them correctly. So prompt 1 would be the directiveness for use desired response type. Because if you take a look, the difference between prompt 1 and prompt 2, in here you provide the output in here. So in here you provide the answer in full sentence compared to the prompt 2 for prompt 1. Right? And the next one, consider the output in the prompt. So which one is the best practice? Okay, so I will give you around 10 seconds to read through the prompt. Okay, so raise your hand if you think prompt 1 was the correct answer. No one? Prompt 1? Okay. Prompt 2. So if you think prompt 2 was the correct answer, feel free to raise your hand. Okay, I see most of in this area raise their hand. In this, you want to raise your hand? Okay. Okay. So the correct answer would be prompt 2. So in here, we provide the output inside of the prompt. So in here, we want to have the answer to be rounded to the nearest integer. The next one, you start your prompt with the question. So I will give you around 5 seconds to read through the prompt 1 and 2. All right. So if you think prompt 1 was the correct answer, feel free to raise your hand. Prompt 1, prompt 1, okay? And then prompt 2. So if you think prompt 2 was the correct answer, no one answered prompt 2? All right, so that means you provide the correct answer. So prompt 1 was actually the correct one. So we start with the question. So that means we can start with why, what, who, when, how inside of your prompt. The next one, in here, the best practice, provide an example response. So I will give you around 10 seconds to read through the prompt for prompt 1 and prompt 2. Remember, you need to provide an example response. All right, so raise your hand if you think prompt 1 was the correct answer. No one? Prompt 2? So feel free, you can raise your hand if you think prompt 2 was the correct answer. All right, I see most of you raise your hand for prompt 2. So that is correct. For prompt 2, we provide an example response. Compared to prompt 1, we didn't provide any example response for prompt 1. Right? So remember, you can also review back inside of your prompt. So make sure before you ask anything or maybe generate text or a summary, you can also go back and ask a different question for your prompt. And in here, you can also make changes every time you ask a question or you need to generate some image or text when you're asking your foundational model or your large language model. And the next topic, we will cover about the basic prompt technique. So we already see some of the best practices for your prompt. And in here, the first one would be zero-shot prompting. So with the zero-shot prompting, you just provide the question without any context when you are doing the zero prompting technique. So in here, for example, with the zero-shot prompt, in here you want to generate the sentiment of the paragraph. And with the zero-shot prompt example, you don't provide any output. So with the zero prompt example, the foundational model or the large language model can still understand what question that you're trying to ask for the prompt, and it will provide you with the output with the zero prompt. And the next one would be the few-shot prompting. So with the few-shot prompting, you need to provide some information or provide any output or example for your prompt when you are using the few-shot prompting technique. So in this example, you want to ask about this specific paragraph, whether or not it's generating a positive, negative, or a neutral sentiment. So with the few-shot prompt example, in here you set the specific use case sample inside of your prompt. So in here you provide the context and you provide the answer inside of your prompt with the few-shot prompt example. And in here, you can see the output. So with the last answer, the question, manufacturing plant is the latest target in the investigation by state official. That means that is a negative sentiment for the few-shot prompt. And the last one would be the chain of thought prompting. So in here, if you need to have a question, complex question, so you can break down the question one by one into a smaller step of question when you are using the chain of thoughts. So rather than providing a long set of question, so you define the question smaller in each individual step when you are going through the chain of thought prompting technique. So if we take a look together for your chain of thoughts, so in here we break down the question into a smaller subset. So the first question we ask about the vehicle. In here, the larger down payment based on the following information. So you ask the first question, and it will generate the output for your first question. And then for your next question, in here, you refer back into the previous prompt. So let's say if you're trying to calculate the total cost of your vehicle A for your down payment, so it will refer your question, your second question into the first question when you are doing your chain of thought technique. And the last one, in here you can ask another question. So what is the total cost of your vehicle B? So rather than having a large question, you ask the question and you break down each question into a subset when you are using the chain of thought prompt technique. Okay? And you can also combine your chain of thoughts with the few-shot. So for example, in here you ask a multiple question using the chain of thought without providing any context inside of your prompt. So in here, you ask about how many viewers can we expect on a Friday. So we provide or we break down the question one by one using the chain of thoughts, but we don't provide as example data and the output when you are using the few shot with the chain of thoughts. Okay, so if we take a look together, so what have you learned? So in here, we already covered about foundational model, and in here we have a subset of your foundational model called a large language model. So that means if you are using your text-to-text model, you are using the large language model, which is a subset of your foundational model. Okay. And the second one, we already covered about the concept of your prompt engineering. So we provide the input, the output, the context, and also we provide some data inside of your prompt, inside of your component prompt engineer. And then we also cover some of the best practices using prompt engineering. So ask a question about what, who, why, and then be concise with the best practices for prompt engineering. And then we also cover about 3 different prompt techniques. So the first one would be the zero prompt technique. So you don't provide any context inside of your prompt. So you don't give any specific instruction inside of your prompt and the output when you are doing the zero-shot prompting technique. Whereas with the few-shot prompting, you provide the output, the example prompt, and the output of your prompt when you're performing a few-shot prompting technique. And the last one, you can break down the question into a multiple step or multiple question using the chain of thoughts. And you can also combine your chain of thoughts with the zero shot, where you break down each individual question without you providing a specific instruction inside of your prompt. Whereas with the few-shot prompting, you combine it with the chain of thoughts, you can have a multiple question inside of your prompt, and you provide the context and also the output when you're combining the chain of thoughts with the few-shot prompting. Right? So before we end the session, so you can also go through the AWS training and certification in the developer pavilion. So if you need to get your skills up or maybe set up your certification, you can go through the AWS and training certification. Or in here, you can also join the self-paced training where you can have your spotlight lab, or in here you can also get certified in the exam prep session, in the training session, in the self-paced lab. And in here, you can also access the skill builder. So if you need to have a hands-on digital training, or maybe you need to have some lab access into AWS for your sandbox account. So feel free, you can go through the AWS skill builder. And you can also go through the AWS certification where you can have 50% discount for your exam. So you can claim your voucher by go through the QR code. Right? So before we end the session, so feel free, you can complete the survey inside of your mobile app for your introduction to prompt engineering. And before I end the session, does anyone have any question regarding the prompt engineering? No? All good? Okay. So don't forget to fill in the information for your feedback inside of your mobile app. And I hope you enjoy the session for today. So thank you so much. Have a nice day.